Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So here's another deck profile for you guys today. This time it's on Trickstars. Now, Trickstars is actually a deck I've been dabbling lately, and I apologize for the delay on it. But I wanted to test out several variations of the strategy. See like what came up with the best results, what can I really do with Trickstar that hasn't really been done before? Well, I finally came up with a very spicy build. Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Branded Trickstar. So, yeah, you heard correct. I am playing the branded engine, and you'll see like what the purpose is of this deck, and yeah, you'll see what I'm going with. But anyway, the main deck is 40 cards, starting off. Actually, no, that's not true. It's 41 cards. I apologize for that. It's 41 cards, starting off with 3 copies of Trickstar Candina. This is your main starter of the whole deck. Searches out any Trickstar card on normal summon only. And also, each time your opponent activates a spell or a trap, you can inflict 200 points of damage. Now, that's the fun gimmick about Trickstars, that because of their burn damage, if you do things correctly, you can actually basically win by time if you needed to go that route. But in general, yeah, Trickstars can do a lot, and they are pretty tricky, so yeah, of course, pun intended. Next, 3 copies of Trickstar Licorice, or Licorice. I always say it's Licorice. Quick effect, you can reveal this card from your hand, then target one Trickstar monster you control except itself, and you can special summon this card, and if you do, return that monster that you targeted back to your hand. And each time your opponent adds cards to the hand or draws them, you inflict 200 points of damage to their life points. Now, funny thing about Trickstar Licorice is that if you normal summon Candina, and let's say you have 2 of these in your opening hand, and your opponent tries to negate it with a Imperm or Veiler, you can actually chain both Licorices, target that Candina, and bounce it right back to your hand, and you get to summon out both of them. So for those who don't remember that combo. Next, 1 copy of Trickstar Corobane. This is basically a free special summon, like it's an extender. It can also act as an honest for your Trickstar monsters by doubling their attack. And yeah, it's just, like I said, it's just really good overall. And it's a 2k beat stick, so not too bad. Because one thing that Trickstars tend to have a problem with, and in fact, anyone who's played Trickstar in the past already knows this, they tend to have a hard time fighting over big monsters. So a card like Corobane, which thankfully is searchable, yeah, it's like you definitely need that edge just to, make sure your Trickstar monsters stay alive. Now, you could run this at 2 if you wanted to, but personally, I think 1 is more than enough. Because again, there are ways to kind of get to it and get it back, so I'm never too worried about it. And of course, 1 Trickstar Lilybell can attack directly and also recycles your Trickstar monsters each time it does battle damage, so pretty nice. And if it's added to your hand except by drawing, you get to special summon it literally for free, but it's a hard once per turn, so bear that in mind. All right, but yeah, that pretty much rounds up our Trickstar ratios. Now for the branded package, in which case it's actually going to be Albaz cards. 2 copies of Fallen of Albaz, since like I said, I am running Branded Fusion in this deck. I figured 2 Albaz was fine. I'm also running 1 Albion just because like it's an upstart goblin. Plus, it helps you dump some of your branded spells or traps to the grave. Now keep in mind, my branded engine isn't like that big, so that's why I'm not running Despians with this. I am, however, running 1 Spriggan's Kit. It's a good way to, cycle back one of your branded spells or traps once you've activated them. It gets it from your deck, grave, or banish pile, but of course you have to send a card from your hand to the bottom of the deck. And of course, 1 copy of Tri-Brigade Courier, just because it is searchable with cards like Brigand, which spoilers say it is in the extra deck, but yeah. But this is pretty much what I am running for the Albaz package. And of course, what goes well with the branded is the Bystials. So 1 copy of Lebellion. You don't actually have to run this if you don't want to. In fact, I've been testing out like which Bystials you should play. But yeah, the Bystial Lebellion, pretty optional, but I like it because it gets you access to Branded Beast. So that's the whole reason why it's in here. But again, if you don't have access to this card, you can probably play Surinir in its place, or second Magnamut, whatever you really want, honestly. But of course, 1 copy of Bystial Magnamut and 1 Druid Swarm. I felt like these 3 were the best choices. I was thinking about running Surinir, but again, my branded package is very, very small, so figured, you know what, we'll just run these 3 instead, because again, I can always get, that way, I don't dump too many of my branded spells and traps to the graveyard, and so on. So that's the whole reason why I decided to pick these 3 specifically. For hand traps, running 3 copies of Ash Blossom. Naturally, what goes well with the Trickstars, 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird, because I am running Trickstar Reincarnation, so for those who remember that Droll and Lockbird Reincarnation lock, yeah, I'm definitely pulling that off. And of course, 3 copies of Finperm. I felt like these were the best hand traps, so yeah, why not? Alright, moving on to spells. As I mentioned before, running 3 copies of Branded Fusion. So like, yeah, there are ways you can like access this pretty quickly, but even then, if you want to just play like there are ways, but even if you don't open up with it, you can easily play the slow game and just kind of like stall out your opponent until you get your hands on Branded Fusion. But yeah, like I'm just like dabbling with right now with what I got right now, and so far it's working for me. Next, 3 copies of Trickstar Light Stage. Searches out any Trickstar monster. Now, of course, it only works on the monsters, but also has an additional effect which some people might forget. You can target 1 set spell or trap your opponent controls, and until the end phase of this turn, it cannot be activated. And during that end phase, they either have to activate it or just send it straight to the graveyard. Next, 2 copies of Triple T. I was going to run Pot of Prosperity at first, but I kind of want to try this one out because if I get hit with Ash at any given point, for example, I can just basically draw 2 cards and just keep going. That's just another good way to, draw into your Branded Fusion. But it's like I said, I'm just kind of testing this out, and so far I like it. But if it doesn't work out too well, then I'll switch back to Pot of Prosperity. That way I can dig deeper into my deck just for that Branded Fusion. 1 Terraforming and 1 called. Oops, sorry, grabbed another card. 1 Called by the Grave, just to make sure like all my plays kind of go through, because Ash is pretty annoying. So yeah. Let's go and get these out of the way first, actually. For the remainder of my traps, running 3 copies of Trickstar Reincarnation. Not only do you get to banish your opponent's entire hand, they have to draw the same number of cards, but this also adds, for cards like Trickstar Licorice, where she burns to your opponent for damage. And also, if on the first search your opponent does, that's when you want to hit them with Joel and Lockbird, and then at the right time, hit them with Trickstar Reincarnation, and they just lose their entire hand. So yeah, it's pretty nasty. 1 Branded Beast, as I mentioned, Lebellion can easily get access to this card. I'm actually running Branded Sword. It's just another target for Albion. That way, I can just like draw into another card. And also, one thing I do like about Branded Sword is that you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one of your banished monsters that spawn out of Albaz, or a monster that mentions it, add it back to your hand. So it's pretty good. And of course, 1 Branded Retribution just to kind of cycle back my cards and so forth. Alright, for the extra deck. Now the extra deck's going to be pretty unique, but let's start with the Link monsters. Running 2 copies of Trickstar Holly Angel, just because, it is the best of the Trickstar Link monsters. 1 Diva Ritas, and the reason I'm running Link monsters in the first place is because one of my fusion monsters requires a Link monster's fusion material. You'll see what that is in just a moment. But I like Diva Ritas is that it burns your opponent for damage for each time they summon monsters. So normal or special summon, so pretty good. And yeah, I just like the card overall. 1 Lina, just requires 2 monsters plus including a light monster, and if it's sent to the graveyard, your main target for it is going to be Candina. So yeah, Lina's just really good in general. And yeah, that's it for the Link monsters. For the fusions, kind of like a standard Branded deck, I'm running running a lot of 2-ofs, 2 Mirror Jade, 2 Albion, 2 Lebellion. And the sole reason for this is simply because like Kashtira is in the format, so you definitely just want to adjust your extra deck accordingly. That way, they don't banish all your important pieces. 1 Rindbrum, since I do have 2 targets to make it. 1 Brigand, which you'll primarily send this off of Mirror Jade's effect. Same thing with Sprin, the Iron Dash Dragon, because like for Brigand you can search out Mercurier. For Sprin you can search out Spriggan's Kit. Also got the Printed Plant Dragostapelia. Just I do run Super Poly on the side deck, so good way to out Dragoon. And finally, 1 copy of Trickstar Band Sweet Guitar. For those who don't remember what this card does, here's what it does. Effect inflicted to your opponent by your Trickstar Link monster is doubled, and if your opponent takes damage by a Trickstar monster's effect, this card gains attack equal to the damage they took, and once per turn during the end phase, if this card attacked this turn, the attack gained from this card returns to 0, and then you can add 1 Trickstar monster from your grave back to your hand. This is pretty good because it's a good way to basically just one-shot kill your opponent, because this card gets really big the more damage they take from burn damage. So yeah, a Trickstar Band Sweet Guitar is pretty good, and you can easily make this off of Lebellion's effect. So like with Lebellion, you can shuffle back a Candina, or not a Candina, or yeah, actually any Trickstar monster along with a Trickstar Link monster if there's already one present in your graveyard. And yeah, it gets pretty nasty. So figured I'd try that out. Alright, now for the side deck, decided to opt for Gamma Seal because the thing about this deck is like you generally do want your normal summon. So like I didn't want to waste it with Lava Golem or Raw Sphere mode. And I've seen some catch tier players start running Crossout Designator to out there to Nibiru. So I figured, you know what, let's just go with the Kaiju this time. And I figured, why not just give him the weakest one, right? 3 copies of Super Poly, pretty strong against the mirror match. Well, in terms of Branded at least. Because, you know, Branded do play a lot of monsters. And I just, with this card, I could just basically break their board. Also decided to tech in Enemy Controller. Enemy Controller is just really funny, this format, and I've actually seen some people tech this in, and I'm starting to see why. 3 Book of Moon. Now, you might be wondering, why not Book of Eclipse? Well, Book of Eclipse, though, is a great card. Unless you know you can break their board, it can be pretty risky. And plus, like, I don't want my opponent to be able to draw more cards. Plus, not to mention, Book of Eclipse can be hit with an Ash Blossom, so that's why I'm opting for Book of Moon instead. And plus, like, against like the Trap Tricks matchup, I've noticed that Book of Moon really hinders their performance. So yeah, and trust me, I've been on the short end of that straw because I do play Trap Tricks as well. So yeah, that's just my take on it. And finally, 3 copies of Evenly Matched. I mean, at this point, it's a staple for every side deck, so definitely run that at 3. It's a great blowout card. Well, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will catch you guys again next time.